Thank you so much for tuning into our talk this afternoon, and a big thank you to Comm Collective for hosting us. I'm Lauren Corbin from Hearst Luxury and Design Collection, here to speak with 4 amazing panelists about the future of the events industry. Yasmine Parrish, founder and chief action officer of Muse Makers Management; Lisa Smith, co-founder of the PRNet; Larry Milstein, co-founder of PRZM; and Dawn Zidonis, executive director and CEO of San Francisco Design Week. Before our panelists give quick intros, let's quickly cover what we're going to chat about. So I love the name of this panel, Let's Get Together, Events of the Future, because I think we can collectively agree all we really want to do right now is come together, and ideally in person. So the events industry is a $325 billion industry that was essentially turned upside down when COVID-19 hit. Events and experiences have been building momentum for decades and truly have become the fabric of brand development, marketing efforts, charitable fundraising, and important milestones. And if you are from New York or LA, you know events are a huge part of the DNA of those cities and the people living and working there as well. I mean, how many nights were your calendars sometimes triple booked with obligations? So over the last several months, our collective experience has truly changed the landscape of events. And now the question is, how do we pivot, buzzword of 2020, and what's the next normal in the event space? So I'm joined by our 4 experts who will share all of their tips and insights on how to produce events, go virtual, host small gatherings, and truly create that memorable experience. So again, welcome to our esteemed panelists, and thank you for being with us today. I just want to go around the Zoom room for brief self-intros. Yasmine, would you like to say hello?
Hi, everyone. So excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Muse Makers is a 360 brand and talent management agency. We specialize in the 3 Ps: production, events, publicity, and partnerships. So really excited to have this dynamic discussion today.
Thank you. Lisa?
Hi everyone, I'm Lisa Smith. I'm the founder of the PRNet. We are an editorial platform and members network for the marketing communications industry. Our members are in-house teams of brands, a lot of agencies, digital influencers, media, independent consultants, etc. Before COVID, we were hosting about 4 events a month in New York City, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Miami, which we quickly in about mid-March spun into all digital event programming, with the exception of our first in-person event last week. So I'm excited to share more on that experience. But yeah, we cover extensively, industry events, news, jobs, other happenings. We profile people on the site. Really, we write about anything that's of interest to our, member demographic in marketing and comm. So thank you for having me here at Lauren and Comm Collective.
Thank you. Larry?
Perfect. Hey everyone, I'm Larry Milstein. I'm the co-founder of PRZM, which is a next-gen marketing consultancy and Gen Z community, which is now 500 members strong globally. I'm also the co-founder of Zoomtopia, which has been titled the first virtual gala. So excited to speak about how events, both in person, IRL, and URL, can evolve in this landscape.
Thank you. And Dawn?
Hi, everyone. I'm the executive director of San Francisco Design Week and the former or founder of World Design Weeks, which is a collective of international design communities around the world and design cities. Our event is approximately 10 days. We have around 350 events annually throughout the Bay Area. So Silicon Valley, the city of San Francisco, and Oakland.
Wow. So we have true experts here, and let's just dive right in. It's been about 6 months, I'd say, since we last officially socially gathered in a big way. My first question is, what is the last event you attended in person? What was it for, and what was that experience like? I guess, Lisa, maybe you should take this one first, since you just had an in-person event.
Yeah, so we just hosted an in-person event, but I literally about an hour and a half ago attended an in-person presentation for Marie Lafon. It was outdoors at the Latteray Courtyard. It was small. You know, I think anyone that's attempting in-person gatherings at the moment is really mindful of a few things. Obviously, the size of the gathering, and you know, it has to be in an outdoor space with a lot of fresh air. And yeah, so that, you know, that was the one that I've most recently attended. We hosted one last week at the Spring Place Terrace. So again, the same considerations. You know, open air. We wanted to work with a venue that felt very comfortable and familiar to people. So most of our members have either hosted events there, attended them. So it had to feel, you know, a sense of familiarity, trust, I guess, in the venue's COVID protocols. You know, we really lent on the venue's, you know, temperature checks, and they also took the information of everyone who attended. So I think, you know, putting all those things together, also looking at food and beverage, how that's served. You know, again, the venue had worked out how to serve individual portions to people, so there wasn't sort of like people, you know, dipping their hands into communal plates or anything. So everything was pretty well mapped out by them, and we just kind of worked in with their protocols. Again, you know, we had maybe 40 people attend that. We're a little tighter with the guest list, bearing in mind, you know, I think for the vast majority of people who came, it was their first event that they had attended in, you know, 6 or 7 months. So just kind of easing people in. But honestly, after the first couple of minutes, most people were wearing a mask the whole time, even though we were outdoors. The overall atmosphere was that people felt very comfortable and just were excited to see humans in real life.
That's what I was really curious about, because with events, you know, it's a very social thing. People want to talk, they want to be close, they want to be engaging. It did seem as though your guests were comfortable with that experience and happy to be there?
100%. I think, you know, being in New York City, outdoor dining's been happening here for a couple of months already. So I think for people, you know, wearing a mask is like a daily, just a normal thing that you do. It's a second skin. Being outdoors gives people that comfort. So I think it was something they had already started to familiarize with, like being, you know, around other people, but in an outdoor setting, fresh air. So yeah, I don't think anybody felt uncomfortable. And certainly, you know, I think people that are very cautious and risk kind of conscious, they'll obviously RSVP that they can't come. You know, at the event that I was at this afternoon, they said, you know, a very well-known influencer and editor decided to do the event virtually. They did an exclusive presentation to her before the event because she was attending a wedding and wanted to do 14 days of just like isolation before doing that. So people who need to take extra care, I think they'll stay away. People who really want to engage and they feel comfortable with it, those are the people that will attend.
Great. And while we're on the topic of the in-person physical events, and this is a question for all of you. So there is a certain magic, right, to producing these physical events. I'm curious kind of, what is your formula or go-to blueprint for producing and hosting a memorable one? And you can talk about pre-COVID or you can talk about now.
Sure, I'll start. So I think, you know, my magic formula is definitely about the venue and the music. Those are the first two. You have to create the vibe, and everything builds upon that. And then I would say the guest list. And of course, food and drink help to kind of ease people into socializing. But my big, I guess, secret that's not going to be a secret anymore is there always has to be some element of delight and surprise. So whether that is, you know, flamingo dancers that come out in the middle of the event, or some kind of element that really is going to like kick the event up a notch, that's something I'm always looking to kind of incorporate and layer into any event that I do.
And have any of you been able to, I like what you say, delight and surprise. Have you been able to capture the spirit of that in the virtual world, and how do you do it?
Yeah, I guess I can dive in on that. I think when we first kind of conceptualized this idea of doing a virtual gala at the end of March, there was so much novelty even in this idea. I think people were really just in like a wait and see mode and weren't necessarily taking bold steps around canceling any sort of in-person event for the spring and summer. And so this was an opportunity to kind of innovate on that model. And so I think what we did successfully, and you know, to a degree now, 6 months later, that novelty factor may not exist as much, was take the trappings of an in-person event and try and like translate them as much as possible virtually. So we had BFA create this structure of like a step and repeat where people would create selfies and submit it to a Dropbox, which were then uploaded to kind of an event gallery. We had a mixologist, do a live cocktail presentation, and we emailed out the ingredients beforehand. We worked with a writer at Vogue who helped consolidate a list of restaurants that were doing like ordering and food, that were donating proceeds for food that was being ordered in. And so in some ways, we've seen more and more of these kind of creative opportunities evolve over the last 6 months. I think what's challenging in the virtual sphere now is we live so much of our life on Zoom that there's fatigue. And so like, if I don't need to be on Zoom and I can be outside, I'm doing that. And so you really need to come up with a reason of why someone needs to show up in that moment and why their participation is important rather than just being an observer, like watching something go on.
I love that. And what you said about give people a reason, that kind of leads me to my next question to you all, which is purpose. So there's usually a reason for events. And I'm very curious as to, why are brands still hosting events right now? And like, what are the new goals and objectives that clients or brands have as far as experiential goes?
Well, I'll speak on this again because I do represent a number of brands that are still activating. I'm currently knee deep in a virtual event and building out a totally custom VES virtual world for 5 to 10-year-old girls.
Wow.
So I think right now brands are really still trying to stay relevant. And I mean, the whole purpose of, many of these events is all about the bottom line, which is money. And so brands are still having to reach their consumer, still having to be able to sell through products. They're still having launches that were planned pre-COVID. So it's like, how do we make the best of the circumstances? And, there's not a reason or a way that brands can go silent for 6 months. So it's like, okay, we still have to engage our consumer. So this is the new path forward. One of my very favorite event experts, Carlene Roy, she posted something that said, pivot or perish. And I think that is really what brands are having to do right now. It's just pivot. We still have to reach our consumers. We still have to have successful launches. So this is the way that we have to do it.
That makes a lot of sense. And I love what you say, pivot or perish. And I think pivoting is the buzzword of 2020, truly. And going virtual was uncharted territory for a lot of brands and people. Like, you have some of the biggest companies who had no idea how to produce these events or really pull it off. So I'm curious if you guys can share a little bit about your first virtual event experience, whether it was a host or attendee. And Dawn, I'd like to talk to you because you manage San Francisco Design Week, which is huge, and I imagine includes a lot of in-person experiences. What kind of has this process been like for you pivoting to virtual?
Sure. Well, to start, we only had a few weeks. Our event is usually beginning or mid-June. So, our city shut down in March. Wow. But at the time, I think like most individuals, we weren't really sure where that was going. Were we going to be reopened in 3 months? So the way we like to approach any event is actually not to look in the near future. So we knew there was going to be Zoom fatigue, and we knew that was going to hit at some point. So it's to take a look and push past that. So what comes after that? And pretty much everything we do, we try to approach it that way. So what ways can we innovate? How can we, our events are a little bit twofold because we serve brands who want to get their product out in front of consumers, but we also serve professionals and the consumers themselves. So it became an opportunity to really try to look into the future and see what people were going to need and what they were going to be expecting. We also had the protests break out about a week before our events. So it really gave new meaning to the word pivots. So, you can do all the planning that you want in the world, but, being a platform to elevate the voices of our community, we really had to plan to not plan, in a sense, because we just needed to be nimble on our feet and be able to transition with the community as they transition and their needs as well.
I love that. And Larry, you talked a little bit about Zoomtopia, which I remember kind of blowing up all over the press. I saw a few articles on it. Can you share a little bit in more detail about Zoomtopia and how you brought that to life?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think we're gonna have to like go in the time machine and bring us back to like the period of March where everyone, for the most part, really was, you know, not just social distancing, but like quarantining or in a form of home lockdown, especially in the New York area. So there was this real desire to connect with one another. And so you saw people creatively use Zooms for happy hour. On the other hand, you saw people creatively use like GoFundMe's for various work to support, you know, frontline workers and, you know, healthcare workers. And so there is now this opportunity to essentially fuse the two. You know, I think, Lauren, you mentioned like the last like kind of events you were supposed to do that Thursday night where like the world shut down. It was like NBA canceled, Tom Hanks like got COVID, like there were all these things that converged at once. That was supposed to be the Frick Young Fellows Ball that I was co-chairing. And obviously for very intelligent reasons, that did not occur. And so I think within me, there was also this recognition that there were young folks who wanted to be philanthropic, wanted to support, and wanted to come together, and yet there hadn't been an outlet for that. And so when I kind of pitched people being like, hey, we're doing this like virtual gala, like the education we needed to really bring people up to speed was like pretty significant. Like we had a host committee, we had some brands come on, we had live guest performers from Sweden or from Northern Europe. It's Anna of the North. She's from Oslo, Norway, sorry, and California. And we were sound checking people on Zoom when there was literally no playbook. Now you have a whole cottage industry of people that are event producers on Zoom. And so it was interesting to see it really kind of blow up as a case study. And I still get kind of calls from nonprofits being like, hey, how can we do this? And I'm more than happy to offer that advice. But what I think is just interesting is everything is really timing. And I think you're now seeing things so professionalized that if you are really going to require people to purchase a ticket to attend a virtual event, you kind of need to up the ante in order for people to really want to come and for it to not feel like a chore anymore. I think it's fascinating to see how people are facilitating an online offline experience. So like you're doing an event, but there's some sort of physical thing delivered to you. So you feel like you are part of it, or there's some sort of unifying factor. And so I think being able to continue to innovate upon the model will be really interesting, and something I first and foremost encourage brands and nonprofit institutions to do.
I love that, and how you mentioned the bringing in person to the virtual, whether it's through mailers or special things that you're sending to the homes of attendees. I'm curious to hear from each of you. What is kind of the most creative, either mailer or in-person experience someone has brought to you as a virtual attendee to an event? Have you received any really cool mailers? Just kind of trying to spark some creativity for anyone listening.
Yeah, well, I'm actually sending one out. So right now, the project that I'm finalizing is with a book series called Rebel Girls. And we've been blessed enough to have, you know, a lot of great brand partners come on. And so one of those brand partners is State Bags. So they make really cute travel bags for all the family, whether adults or kids. And so we have custom backpacks that we'll be sending to some A-list talent and bloggers. And then it'll be complete with the Rebel Girls book set. Rebel Girls is a very creative and brand forward book series. So we have a lot of amazing assets to go into it. So that's one I'm really, really excited about. And I mean, these book bags, they're not JanSport. These are like $60 book bags for like preschoolers. So they're really amazing. So I'm excited to send that out and see people's delight and surprise.
I think that's wonderful. And I also imagine that these mailers that you're receiving at home, it helps spark the social conversation on, let's just say, Instagram about your event, right? People are always posting to their stories about these amazing things that they're receiving. So have you guys seen that happening as well? Does adding that in-person element help spark social engagement for the different virtual experiences you might be hosting?
100%. I would oh, go ahead, Lisa.
Sorry, I was just going to say I attended a fragrance launch for YSL recently, and they sent out a great box ahead of time, which I thought was really well thought through. They had the actual fragrance. They had like a backstage pass that you had to scan to actually get access to the event. And they also had cocktail ingredients, which were inspired by the notes of the fragrance. So you could actually create the cocktail, wow, scan the backstage pass to get access. I mean, they really went all out. They had, I mean, it was with the face of the brand was Lenny Kravitz. So they, you know, did a Zoom of him in his home in the Bahamas, being interviewed by someone. They had Vashti DJing is kind of like the intro part of it. You could go off into various rooms. So it was impressive how they had like pre-event physical elements sent to you that you could then engage with like during the virtual event.
I do think, and Larry, you mentioned it's all about like new innovations. I think that those intentional and really thoughtful mailers are kind of the newest innovation that I've been seeing happening. We talked about this a little bit before, how there's fatigue and you kind of have to change up the model and what you're doing and the production level to keep people engaged and interested and excited. My question to you all is, do you think virtual events are still effective? Like, are they still working?
I would love to answer that. I think the way we were all heading was towards a virtual events strategy. Mm-hmm. And I think COVID is what actually pushed us into doing that. And I think in the future, most events are going to be a hybrid. There'll be in-person components, and then there will also be the video components. So I think that while people have Zoom fatigue and screen fatigue, I think people are figuring out very quickly that an all-day conference, an all-day workshop with 2 15-minute breaks does not work anymore, and it's not what people want from an event. So I think the innovation and the strategy is going to come from a blend of different things. Some in-person events, you know, from a sustainability standpoint, not everybody can fly everywhere in the world, mm-hmm. You know, our carbon footprints. So I think this is going to allow more accessibility, but there's still going to be that balance where you might get some things, you know, shipped to you. You might have some in-person element, or you'll have this sort of broken up new approach to some video programming as well, or virtual programming. Another thing I wanted to add to that was sort of the interactivity aspect of it. You know, I think we've moved way past just being on a screen or, you know, even listening to panelists just speaking, that, you know, there's some other element to doing that. One of the things that we did to recreate sort of what was missing from in-person events is we created a space, a virtual space where people could go, meet people, exchange business cards. There was a meditation room where people could chill out. So there are all these different aspects that you can integrate into your programming. But I think where we are now, we've come a lot farther than where we were, but I think we have a lot farther to push that envelope in order for people to completely accept online programming.
You make really, really good points. And one of the things I want to jump back to, as you mentioned, the meditation room or the networking room, because I do think those are other innovations that we're seeing happening virtually now too, is those kind of side rooms. Can you share a little bit more about perhaps how you produce those and what does that look like logistically?
Sure. Well, we actually partnered with a technology company who already had this software. So they designed a custom experience for our attendees. So it would be something that was accessible. People just had to log in to do this. They didn't have to have a lot of knowledge about virtual reality. It was actually virtual reality world. Mm-hmm. And then they could move about freely and easily without having to be explained the concept. To explore the space and yeah, have that sort of connection. So you could actually walk up to somebody and say hello and know who they, you know, and have a conversation in real time. So I think, but it would have been very difficult because we only had a matter of a few weeks, had this partner collaborate with us on that. So yeah.
Really
existing, I would suggest find partners and collaborators who have existing technology or products or ideas that you can then customize. Don't try to do it from scratch, especially because it'll take a really long time. And by the time you do, people are going to have moved on to something else.
Exactly. And, you know, we've said this, event production creates the experience. So it is really important to keep kind of innovating there and working with the experts who know what they're doing. Have you guys come across any virtual event formats that you've loved and thought were kind of cutting edge? Like, aside from right now we're on a Zoom, what other kind of formats have you seen brought to life virtually?
Well, I think Hopin is seems to be one of the leading platforms that people are doing large scale conferences in. Now, I think we all come back to love. I don't think we found, that platform that we absolutely love yet. I think everyone is still kind of growing and learning in the space. So everything has its plus and minuses. I don't think there's really one platform that's got it 100% right yet. But I know that Hopin is one. And to Dawn's point, I do think it's really important to partner, even with Rebel Girls, we're partnering with actually based out of San Francisco, a production firm that has already done virtual events. And, they helped us build out a custom wireframe based on what they already had existing. And even that has been a challenge, getting, the nuance of not only doing an event online, but an event online for kids. So, I think everyone is really kind of learning and growing in the space. So I don't know that there's 100% the perfect platform, but Hopin is definitely one that you could have a successful event on.
Amazing.
Could I add to that from a non-technology perspective as well? I recently attended an event in Oakland that was put on by a group of artists and performers, live performers, where you drove around, you stayed in your car, but they created this sort of experience that took you to different parts of the neighborhood to witness different stories throughout that area. And they would email you music and they would hold up a sign and you would play the music in your car. So it was sort of this, low to no tech experience, but yet it was still safe, but it was completely unique. And it reminded me that, sometimes you need the tech or you want the tech, and the tech is great, but sometimes it's cool to peel away those layers as well. And go with what we know, just approach it from a completely different way.
I love that, Dawn. One thing we haven't touched on yet, and we're kind of running short on time, you guys are so easy to talk to, this is amazing, is guest list. So the guest list really plays a significant role in in-person events. If you aren't on the list, you can't get in, the idea of VIPs, etc. What does the guest list mean in a virtual world? And how are you curating this list? Is it more about keeping it open for a wide audience to kind of get those views, or is it more about the right audience? Lisa, do you want to start with this one?
Sure, yeah. I think it depends whether those people are going to be front of, if you're going to actually see them on the video or presentation or you're not. Going back to the YSL event, they obviously had their higher talent, but then they'd also gotten quite influential people to be part of it. Either it was on a live Zoom chat or in some other aspects. So it depends if you're just someone watching it passively, or you're somebody actually kind of participating on a different level, where you'll be actually visually seeing, or you're lending your influence, I guess, to that event.
Great. And then I have a question as far as strategy goes for you guys. It is important to get people to attend your events, right? So if you're hosting an event in person, you want it to be a packed room, you want there to be the energy. What kind of strategies or techniques are you guys using to get people to show up for you virtually, which, as we know, is not as easy because you're already home, you're maybe sitting on your couch already checked out for the day. Larry?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things with managing a guest list and getting people to show up. I think one thing that's actually really beautiful about, a virtual event is that if you have the opportunity to be more inclusive, like the ability to really scale, like is there. And so unless like there is this kind of like notion of exclusivity that you need to somehow maintain, I think it's really beautiful that this gives us the chance to bring more people into the fold that otherwise constraints wouldn't allow us. So I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing that I really observed kind of through the PRZM angle in our community and working with other brands is really just the value of having these strong micro communities that are connected with one another and can be easily tapped into. And I think that, you know, it's one thing if you're creating an event that's just kind of very open-ended and it's like, okay, like anyone should join, here's the link, like here's the swipe up, like show up at this time. I think it's very different to be like, hey, like we're going to, like, I think what comes top of mind is we're working with a magazine for a launch of their next gen issue. And we're going to have it just, you know, among the PRZM community members. And I think the attrition is so much lower because it really feels like something that's tailored to a community that people are a part of. And so whatever community you're looking to tap into, whether it's, you know, the super fans of Glossier or whether it's, you know, Hey Mamaco or whatever kind of sub niche, I think that that's a great way to get people to show up because it's not just this like open-ended invite, but something that's really intentional for our community.
Love that. And beyond, you talked a little bit about who you're inviting. I guess my next question is, as far as host and talent goes, a lot of events require bringing on the right host, also inviting talent. How is that working in this virtual world? Do you find people more willing? Is it as exciting for them? Yasmine, do you want to start with that? Because I know you work with a lot of talent.
Yeah, so I think it's still of the utmost importance. You know, whoever your audience is, definitely finding just the right talent that will really help to not only attract your audience, but also, you know, spread the message wide and get, you know, media outlets to cover the event. It's still so important. I know that one best practice, if I could give any, you didn't ask for that, but I'll give it, would definitely be power of being able to pre-record, especially, you know, depending on the level of production that you're doing. Pre-recording, I think, has proven to be a way to be able to deliver like perfect content as much as possible, and ways to be able to really kind of curate and make sure that there's no fumbling or no, you know, in some ways, depending on the level of production, you still want to really have that, and to Larry's point, have that really polished look to your event. And so I think pre-recording is a way to be able to do that.
Amazing. So we talked a little bit about this before, the future of events. And Dawn, I think you said it perfectly. I'm curious to know if you all agree. Are virtual events here to stay? Is it going to be a hybrid? And more importantly, in-person events. Is there going to be a new model for them moving forward, and what do they look like? Are brands or people still going to be saying, we want a 300-person event launch party in a huge, you know, loft space? Who would like to jump in on that one?
I can jump in on that. I think it's whether you're looking in the, you know, forthcoming 6 months, whether you're looking in 18 months or like 3 years from now. I think you can have different answers to that. I definitely feel that in-person interactions, people are so deeply pent up, and then they're feeling isolated. They want to come back to be around each other. So I think if you can do smaller events, those are actually going to be really coveted, and I think there'll be a huge interest in attending those. We just have to modify with masks, you know, and other usual COVID protocols to be able to carry those off it. And maybe, you know, even now there are rapid result COVID tests that you can do on site, get your test results back in 15 minutes. So, you know, that could be a solution. Also, obviously, down the track when there's a vaccine, if that can work, you know, there are solutions with science and technology that can bring people back together. But, you know, in the short term, they just have to be smaller and, you know, preferably outdoors, and you just follow your local city's guidelines. Yeah. And, you know, they've mapped it out. You should be safe.
And as far as small gatherings go, because I mean, you're right, those are the future and they're safe and just as meaningful as a big event. What advice do you all have for people on hosting those small gatherings? How do they do it right and make them impactful with just a small curated list of attendees?
I think it's with the same care and thought that's given to the over-the-top events. I mean, I think people enjoy the same things no matter the size of the audience. So whether you have a, you know, a 15 or 30 person event versus a 300 person event, they still want, you know, the beautiful food and drinks, still want the music, the vibes, they still want the surprise and delight. So I think, you know, just the same formula can be applied, but you can spend a whole lot less. And if you are on, you know, not on the client side, but if you are representing clients, you can also make them even happier by spending less money, hopefully. So
I love that you say you can pull this off for less money. That's one thing about in-person physical events. I think some people outside of this industry do not realize exactly how much money it costs to produce an event. And I mentioned before, the events industry is a $325 million industry. So my question to you all is, will business models for events change? And do you guys have any suggestions for everyone out there about how they can monetize virtual events successfully?
I guess I have a point. I actually think if we somehow magically knew that COVID was eradicated today, right now, I think people would be running to participate in events. So I actually think once this, hopefully, God willing, resolves, I think in-person events will return with the same interest, if not more gusto around actually participating in in-person things. That's just my guess around it, just knowing you know, human beings, like if you didn't have to attend something virtually, it depends on what type of event it is, but I don't really want to get to the end. I used to enjoy getting to the end of my workday and like maybe going and, I don't know, like changing my outfit or like calling the Uber. Wait, and then you don't know what's ahead and you like go there and it's a whole ritual around that. It's not to like then tune into another Zoom. It's just, I don't think it can ever truly replace it. I mean, I don't attend a lot of sort of long full day conferences. I never did that, so I can't speak to those experiences. So certainly maybe those could be virtual, but you know, the fabulous and inspiring events that, you know, happened so often in New York, I think people will miss that. And I think they will want that back. So yeah.
I love what you said about the rituals involved with going out, because even myself, I find myself missing those. It's just the little things are so important. How does everyone feel about, and this will be kind of my last question before we jump into a rapid fire round of one word answer questions. How do you guys feel about ticketing virtual events to drive revenue?
I think it needs to be, oh, go ahead, Dawn.
I was just going to say really quickly, you know, any event you need to fund to produce. You have people working on it, you have expenses. I think we're going to see I think we've already seen a turn from having that revenue come from attendees to instead coming from stakeholders and sponsors, because, you know, from an accessibility standpoint, and we have so many videos and content online already, I don't think ticketing attendees online is the wave of the future.
Larry, did you want to chime in?
I agree with that. I think it needs to be at an accessible price point. I also am of this philosophy that if you're a major institution that's like throwing a gala and you're trying to, you know, charge the same prices for a virtual experience, it's so much better to almost be like upfront and just be like, hey, every year we know that you're kind of pledging this type of commitment, like rather than do this show and dance and like create this maybe virtual experience that's lackluster. Like, it's also okay to just be really upfront and say, we're struggling and we need the support, and would you be able to commit that again, and not trying to just kind of create a watered down experience. And I think just more generally in terms of like the future of like virtual versus in person, like I in my bones completely agree with Lisa in terms of hoping that this will come back. What I caution is like maybe in this interim period, which who knows how long it is, people really pushing the boundary of what's really socially acceptable or health and responsibly acceptable, just because that's only going to lengthen this really long tail that we have. And you're seeing public figures really be called out when they are attending events and someone is not wearing a mask. And just there's so many different levels of risk that we don't even not necessarily perceive as we head into colder weather on the East Coast. And so if you are a brand considering doing an in-person event, I would always err on the side of not being the pioneer, because you do not want to be the person that pushed the envelope just a little too far and then you're getting a backlash that's not worth like a bespoke cocktail. Like that's just the math there.
And you hit the nail on the head. It's kind of, we have to be respectful and safe given the current world circumstances. And we're all in this together, whether we're coming together virtually or hopefully in person sooner rather than later. The events industry will definitely forge on. I want to ask you all 3 fun rapid fire questions, just 1-word answers. You don't have to get into the detail. Okay, so what's one event you've never been to that you're dying for an invite to?
The Grammys.
Okay. Larry?
Met Gala.
I knew you were going to say that. Dawn?
Oh man. I have no idea. On this one.
Okay, Lisa?
I know it's Larry, although I feel like it would disappoint on such potentially, but I'm with Larry. I mean, it's that quintessential New York event.
Okay, great. I'm with Yasmine. I love the Grammys for the music. Who is your dream +1 to your next event? Yasmine?
I'll just say Barack Obama. I don't know.
That's a good one. You can't go wrong. You cannot go wrong with Barack.
So
You're
we can
Michelle.
go together.
Larry?
I am deep in rewatching Sex and the City. I was too young to appreciate it when it first came out. So I'm going to say like a 2000s era Carrie Bradshaw.
Love. Great choice. Lisa?
I don't know. I think I've got politics on the mind just with the election coming up. So maybe it's just got to be someone else like Barack Obama from the politics sphere. Maybe Elizabeth Warren. I'm just a huge,
Yes.
I'm just a fangirl for her. So probably her.
Love. And then last one, guys. What is the secret sauce, like that one ingredient that makes an event extra special? And I know some of you have touched on it, but just that one ingredient that makes an event special.
People.
Dawn? Oh, would you say, Lisa?
It's the people. You know,
People?
you can be with 5 people having a beer or sitting on a milk crate and have the best night of your life. It's the people.
I agree with that. What about everybody else?
I was actually going to say connections. So I think it's what makes the difference between a virtual event and an in-person event, when you can have an interaction or a connection with someone else.
Yeah.
Love that.
I've already kind of mentioned my like ricochet moment, my, falling from the chandelier moment, but I actually think it's really also the music. Like if the music is right, especially if you have a live DJ and he can feel or she can feel the energy of the crowd and gets it spot on, music is the thing that like unites us all. And so I would say the music.
I should have created a playlist for this panel, you guys, next time.
That's amazing. I would just say, yeah, like I think it's the vibe, it's the energy. And I think that can be achieved by the people, by the music, by the different, and I think you can walk into a place and you know that it's stale and it feels flat. It's like walking into like an empty club and you're just like, I gotta get out of here.
Yeah.
But then there are other times where you just walk into a space and there's just something about like the juju and just that energy. And I think that's the secret sauce.
You feel like you're floating through the room, like when it's the right energy, right? You're just like, oh, I'm floating through. We're in the right place. We're gonna have a great time.
I miss that.
I've had a great time with you all, and I feel like this has been good vibes and good energy. So thank you so much for your time and your expertise. It has been wonderful, and I look forward to seeing you guys at your next in-person event you're hosting. So please invite me.
We'll do.
Sure, Lauren.
Thank you guys. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.